Chapter 289 Immortal's Technique. Although the young lady's charming face revealed doubt, she knew her grandfather wasn't one to babble nonsense and became extremely shocked. She could only resist further looking in Han Li's direction with some difficulty, seeing that he taught the other party a small lesson without truly harming him. Han Li was fully satisfied. At this moment, his lips slightly moved and transmitted his voice over. Then the azure-robed old man immediately heard Han Li's voice. After you leave the Prince Sin's mansion, don't hurry to depart. Wait for me at the mansion's back gate. I have a few matters to ask you. Han Li's voice was filled with the unquestionable tone of a command, stunning the old man and causing him to inwardly curse in his heart without end. Could it be this expert doesn't want to let this grandparent-grandchild pair go? What plan does he have for these two in mind? Regardless, it's fortunate for me that the other party doesn't seem to be the merciless type. There shouldn't be any danger. Furthermore, being able to form a relationship with a Foundation establishment cultivator is an invigorating opportunity that's hard to come by for a clan. The azure-robed old man could only think these comforting thoughts. However, his heart was a mess, and he was suffering internally without end. When Han Li saw this, he faintly smiled and returned his attention to the old white-haired Taoist. At this moment, Immortal Master Wu had already finished inspecting the majority of the crowd and still hadn't found someone with immortal karma. The youngster who were declared to lack immortal karma could only dejectedly return to their seats. Their seniors naturally didn't have any pleased expressions. What's immortal karma? He's clearly looking for people with spiritual roots. However, this old Taoist isn't a completely ignorant and appears to truly be looking to accept disciples. Otherwise, he could just casually point to a few random people. Han Li thought indifferently as he saw the old Taoist examining each of the youths for spiritual roots with extreme care. However, Han Li felt that looking for disciples here was truly futile. Among these 50 to 60 people, the chances of finding someone with spiritual roots were truly too low. Just as Han Li thought this, the old white-haired Taoist loudly shouted, "This child has immortal karma. I can accept him as my disciple." When Han Li heard this, he blankly stared. He couldn't help but look at this person with immortal karma. He only saw a simple and fat youth standing in front of Immortal Master Wu with a vacant expression, not knowing what to do. A large pot-bellied middle-aged man wearing purple silk robes stood next to the boy. He closely asked with an incredulous expression, "Immortal Master, my clan's child Jing truly has immortal karma. Are you mistaken?" This man felt that a huge meat pie had truly fallen on his head and didn't dare to believe it. For so many years, this son of his had never shown the slightest of talent or accomplished anything. But now, the youth who only ate and didn't give back to society had unexpectedly caught the eye of this immortal master. The youth's father truly didn't know if he was dreaming. He, benefactor, be at ease. This humble Taoist has already examined this boy many times. Your son truly has immortal roots and can study immortal techniques together with the prince's son. When Immortal Master Wu saw this, he twirled his white beard around his finger and smiled. "Many thanks, Immortal Master. Many thanks. Although this one isn't a wealthy and great noble, we still have a bit of meager land. Tomorrow, I will certainly prepare a great offering for accepting my son as your apprentice." "Son. Quickie kowtow to the Immortal Master." After the middle-aged man verified this matter with certainty, he danced with joy and began speaking incoherently. When the youngsters who hadn't been chosen saw this, they were dumbfounded. The person who entered Immortal Wu's eyes was Fatty Tong, whom they had always regarded as useless. This kind of useless person actually had immortal roots. This was far too hard to believe. Not only did the youngsters think this, but their seniors also couldn't help but look at each other in dismay and feel that this was quite incredulous. After all, this useless youth Tong Jing had been chosen instead of their own sons. Han Li's expression, on the other hand, wasn't the slightest bit strange. People who possess spiritual roots weren't always handsome and confident or ravishingly beautiful. Furthermore, there wasn't the slightest relationship with their capacity for knowledge either. There was absolutely no pattern that could determine whether someone possessed spiritual roots. Otherwise, cultivator clans wouldn't have appeared, and cultivator sects wouldn't have to go out and seek brilliant students either. However, to actually find someone with spiritual roots in a small group was a bit surprising to Han Li. It seemed that the luck of this Taoist priest wasn't bad. Naturally, the others in the hall didn't understand this grain of truth that Han Li and the other cultivators clearly knew. They all whispered to each other in soft voices. There were a few shrewd individuals among them who started to doubt the authenticity of this immortal Wu and were slightly hesitant to come forward to test themselves when they heard this. As such, the old Taoist was met with a moment of awkward silence. When Prince Sin saw this, he showed displeasure. However, those in the hall had been his good friends for many years, so he couldn't just say something unpleasant. He could only tactfully say to the old Taoist, "Immortal Master Wu, everyone here is but a common mortal. They have not yet witnessed immortal techniques and magic. Could Immortal Master please reveal your power and broaden everyone's horizons?" Having heard Prince Sin's words, everyone immediately grew quiet and waited to see what the Immortal Master would say. The old white-haired Taoist muttered to himself for a moment and openly agreed. Then he called for everyone to follow him to the open area in front of the large hall. Following the old Taoist's words, everyone flowed out of the large hall. Han Li also followed them out, but he did so indifferently. Surprisingly, that grandparent-grandchild pair didn't move. It seemed they were deeply worried about Han Li's appointment with them. Outside the guest hall, the old Taoist stood while surrounded by the crowd and started to cast magic. From the gestures his hands executed, his even stance, and his faint muttering of incantation in a low voice, his appearance grew even more mysterious. As such, the spectators around him held their breath and rigidly stared at the old Taoist without moving. But when Han Li heard this incantation, he inwardly rolled his eyes. At this moment, the old Taoist joined his palms, and after he separated them, two roaring, fist-sized fireballs appeared in his hands. The nearby temperature suddenly rose, and the smell of flames filled the air. This was none other than the fireball technique that all cultivators with fire spiritual roots knew. But what was viewed as a common occurrence to cultivators immediately caused the nearby crowd to gasp in surprise. They felt it was truly inconceivable. But the next scene not only caused these mortals to continue with their stupefaction, but it also greatly shocked Han Li. That was because the old Taoist then changed his hand incantations and caused the roasting fireballs to gradually fuse and transform before the crowd's eyes. First, the combined flame gradually grew wings. Then a pointed beak, immediately followed by thin claws and a tail, transforming into a small and exquisite flame bird. Could it be the firebird technique? Having seen this, Han Li's nerves tightened, not daring to believe his eyes in the slightest. The firebird technique was a genuine mid-grade magic technique, one that Han Li himself was unable to grasp. However, this mere chi condensation cultivator was unexpectedly able to use it on the spot. It was truly far too hard to believe. It was no wonder that Han Li wondered if he had seen incorrectly. However, Han Li's shock only lasted for a short moment. Soon after the old Taoist casted his magic, Han Li discovered a huge discrepancy between this fire bird and the genuine firebird technique. Although this small bird created from fireballs resembled the appearance of the firebird magic technique, the discrepancy in size was far too great. When the firebird from the firebird technique spread its wings, it spanned over 3 meters. Instead, the firebird that this old Taoist created was only the size of a fist. It was fundamentally impossible to mention them on equal terms. But what truly convinced Han Li that this was but a false firebird technique was the magnitude of its fluctuation of magic power. The destructive power of the true firebird technique wasn't something a foundation establishment cultivator dared to receive. However, the magic power fluctuations of this small and exquisite sparrow-like firebird were exactly the same as a fireball. It wasn't greater in the least. It seemed it was merely a change of shape. After Han Li thought this through, he was in good spirits and found it quite funny. He had nearly been tricked by this small trick. It truly caused one to lose face. However, this person's flame manipulation technique was truly astonishing. Han Li didn't know whether he could match the fine control of flame that this Qi condensation cultivator could accomplish. This old Taoist piqued Han Li's interest. In his next performance, the old Taoist thoroughly verified Han Li's thoughts. After seeing the small firebird spread its wings and soar, it immediately fell to the floor and transformed into a dog that cheerfully ran around the old Taoist. Not long after, the small dog transformed into a fire snake, then transformed a small person. This series of astonishing performances left these mortals dumbstruck and speechless with gaping mouths, having never seen magic techniques before. Then the old Taoist suddenly pointed a finger from his hand and made the final transformation of the flame into a small horse. The new form charged towards a small cherry sapling to the side. In the blink of an eye, the flame combusted and turned the sapling into ash. This was the end of the old Taoist's show. At this moment, the spectators woke from their daze and did their utmost to hail the old Taoist Immortal Taoist. Their original doubts had long been cast away. How could they show the slightest bit of disbelief?